The Soviet military dominated global strength competitions for decades, and there's something fascinating about their legacy. Even today, the world's top UFC fighters and Olympic wrestlers disproportionately come from former Soviet regions. This isn't coincidence. The Soviets discovered 3 training principles that fundamentally changed how we understand human strength. And what's interesting is that their approach contradicts almost everything modern gyms teach you. Most people believe getting stronger requires destroying your muscles until they can't function. The Soviets proved that's actually backwards. Their method was built on a completely different foundation. And I'm going to break down their exact system across 3 categories: training protocol, recovery strategy, and nutrition approach. But first, you need to understand something crucial. The Soviets didn't view strength the way we do. They treated it as a skill, not just a physical attribute. And that one conceptual shift changes everything about how you train. The training protocol. Let's start with their most counterintuitive method, something called greasing the groove. The basic principle sounds almost absurdly simple. Perform multiple sets throughout your day using moderate resistance, never training anywhere close to failure. Your immediate reaction is probably skepticism. How does avoiding failure build strength? Here's the framework they used. Think about learning to shoot a basketball. You don't practice by shooting until your arms literally give out. You repeat the movement pattern hundreds of times with proper form. The Soviets applied this exact logic to strength development. They practiced movement patterns repeatedly, systematically training their nervous system to activate more muscle fibers simultaneously. Here's what that looked like in practice. Soviet soldiers might perform 5 push-ups immediately after waking, another 5 reps an hour later, 5 more mid-morning. This pattern continued throughout the entire day. The volume accumulates significantly, but no single set ever feels demanding. Why does this work? Your nervous system controls muscle activation through electrical signals. Consistent, fresh practice makes those neural pathways faster and more efficient. After several weeks, your nervous system can recruit substantially more muscle fibers during a single contraction. Same muscular structure, dramatically increased strength output. Their second core exercise was kettlebell snatches. You grip the kettlebell, swing it between your legs, then explosively drive it overhead in one continuous motion. You don't necessarily need an actual kettlebell. Any heavy object that allows similar movement patterns works. Soviet soldiers performed hundreds of consecutive reps, not to build massive muscles, but to develop a specific type of endurance. This training triggers something unique physiologically. It simultaneously develops cardiovascular capacity while building strength. It fortifies tendons and connective tissue. And critically, it teaches your body to function as an integrated system rather than isolated muscle groups. But there's a third component most people completely overlook. The Soviets obsessed over making joints and connective tissue as resilient as the muscles themselves. Because powerful muscles attached to weak joints is essentially a guaranteed injury. Their approach was straightforward: pull-ups and dips for upper body structural integrity, carrying heavy objects like sandbags for grip and postural strength, core exercises to protect the spine under load. The objective was simple: construct a body capable of handling any physical demand without breaking down. This is where 99% of people fail. They train muscles exclusively while ignoring everything else. Soviet soldiers could perform at maximum capacity day after day, specifically because they built comprehensive structural resilience. For your implementation, this means prioritizing fundamentals: pull-ups, dips, loaded carries, core work. These movements create lasting strength that persists even as you age. Now here's where their frequency protocol gets interesting. Soviet soldiers trained 6 to 7 days weekly, but, and this is critical, they didn't simply hammer themselves relentlessly. They used something called wave loading. One day would involve maximum effort training. The following day would be minimal intensity, light running or gymnastic movement patterns. Special forces units often trained twice daily, morning and afternoon sessions. But again, both sessions weren't high intensity. Perhaps morning training was light movement to activate the nervous system. Afternoon would be heavy loading. Here's what this means for your application. You don't need complete rest days, where you do absolutely nothing. On recovery days, go for a walk, do light mobility work, engage in low-intensity movement. This maintains blood circulation to your muscles, which actually accelerates recovery rather than slowing it down. The recovery protocol, which brings us to the second critical method. The Soviets understood something most people completely miss. Training alone doesn't create strength. Training combined with strategic recovery creates strength. they developed specific recovery protocols that were considered equally important as the training itself. Their most famous recovery tool was a Russian sauna with a very specific protocol. The key was alternating between extreme heat exposure and ice-cold water immersion. Here's the physiological mechanism. When you sit in intense heat, your blood vessels dilate significantly, allowing increased blood volume circulation. When you immediately plunge into frigid water, those vessels constrict rapidly. This dramatic oscillation functions like a mechanical pump, forcing metabolic waste products out of muscle tissue, specifically lactic acid, which creates that sore, heavy feeling after hard training. But there was an additional component. They used something called venik, bundles of birch branches. They would rhythmically strike the skin surface with these branches. It sounds bizarre, but the mechanism is solid. It dramatically increases blood flow to the skin surface and underlying muscle tissue. However, sauna protocols weren't their only recovery strategy. The Soviets rejected the concept of passive rest days. They believed in active recovery, light movement that's completely different from your intense training sessions. Swimming, casual basketball, light jogging. The movement intensity was low enough that it didn't stress the body, but maintained continuous blood circulation. Why is this effective? Movement, even at low intensity, keeps blood pumping through muscle tissue. When you remain completely sedentary, this process slows considerably and recovery extends longer. For your implementation, this means walking on off days, light stretching, swimming if accessible. Any activity that moves your body without approaching significant exertion. Now, the Soviets added one more element to optimize recovery. They used specific herbal compounds. And no, not what you might assume. Not steroids. They used adaptogenic herbs to help the body manage stress more effectively, because stress hormones actively destroy muscle tissue and inhibit strength development. Soviet scientists extensively tested rhodiola on soldiers and Olympic athletes for decades. Their findings were significant. This herb helped people maintain alertness during severe sleep deprivation. It improved mood regulation during high-stress situations, and it helped athletes maintain steady performance and reduce fatigue even when maximally exhausted. Modern research confirms it reduces cortisol, the stress hormone that breaks down muscle tissue. It can improve endurance capacity and reduce perceived effort during exercise. These aren't magical supplements. They simply help your body adapt more effectively to training stress. You can find rhodiola at any supplement retailer. The nutrition protocol. Now we've covered training methodology and recovery strategy, but there's still one essential component: the nutrition protocol. Soviet nutrition wasn't complicated. They didn't count every calorie or weigh every food portion. They ate real food that supported intense training. 3 core principles guided their entire approach. First, the kasha principle. The foundation of every meal was kasha. This is buckwheat groats, occasionally oats, but predominantly buckwheat. Why buckwheat specifically? It has a low glycemic index, meaning it doesn't spike blood sugar. It provides steady energy release for hours, which is essential for strength development. Buckwheat is also loaded with critical minerals: magnesium, which enables proper muscle contraction; iron, which carries oxygen through your bloodstream; and it contains more protein than most grain sources. Second principle, their primary protein source. The Soviets didn't have protein powders. They consumed real food, primarily meat, but their most important protein source was something called tvorog, essentially cottage cheese or quark. It's extremely high in casein protein, which digests slowly. Unlike whey protein that enters your system rapidly and depletes quickly, casein releases amino acids gradually over hours. Soviet athletes consumed this before sleep. This maintained continuous protein supply to muscle tissue throughout the night, preventing muscle breakdown during sleep when you're not eating. Third principle, they matched food intake to training demands. During intense training phases, they ate substantially more. They weren't concerned about gaining modest body fat if strength metrics were increasing. Their largest meal always followed their hardest training session. That's when muscles are most receptive to nutrient absorption. The implementation? I know this is comprehensive information. You might want to rewatch this and take notes. And here's the important part. You don't need to implement every single Soviet protocol perfectly. Extract the components that fit your lifestyle and start there. The core concepts: treat strength as a skill requiring neural training, prioritize active recovery over complete rest, and fuel your body with real food matched to your training intensity. If you want to dive deeper into Soviet training methods, check out the video on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.